Well, we have Wren here, and a longtime good friend of mine, and a lot of other people that I know. And we're just going to be exploring a couple of things. And he expressed some interest in my concept of a drop in a bucket. And that drop in a bucket, in my opinion, can be a drop in anybody's bucket. It can be a drop in your bucket. It can be a drop in my bucket. And it can be a drop in somebody else's bucket. And we were talking about the homeless situation here in Denver. I suspect in some other parts of Denver and Colorado as well, but we're focusing primarily on what we see here in Denver. Um, Randy, there's been a lot of talk and uh, discussions and semi solutions. I say semi because we still have a homeless problem. But what do you, and you mentioned something about if there was part of the issue that politicians would discuss, would deal with the homeless, I wondered, would anybody pay that enough attention to pay that politician
Well,
any attention?
at my church, St. Andrew's Episcopal Church, I have a meeting with my priest tomorrow. Her name is Elizabeth Randall. And I didn't really make the appointment to talk about our new project at St. Andrew's, but I think I want to talk about it now.
Okay.
We're building a number of tiny houses for homeless women on the north parking lot of St. Andrews. And it's very controversial in the neighborhood because our neighborhood has become extremely upscale. And there's some neighbors in that area that the last thing they want is for their property value to be at risk of losing its value because we're going to have a parking lot full of homeless women in tiny houses. Now, the good news that I learned on Sunday at a meeting that we had is that the Dolores Project is in charge. And the Dolores Project will qualify the women that will rent these tiny houses from St. Andrews to live in.
What is the Dolores Project?
It runs the Gathering Place, and it also runs Warren Village by Cheeseman Park.
Okay.
And the lady that runs that is the authority of what we're doing at St. Andrews.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lawyer by the name of Mike that's given PowerPoint presentations again and again. And we're only going to have women in the houses, and the Dolores Project will qualify them because they're going to be specific women because these women can't be escaping a violent situation at home. Because we don't want their husband that might be abusive showing up at the tiny houses and making trouble, in the area that my church is trying to create a safe place for women. Now, I do know that the last several years, the Dolores Project has housed homeless women at St. Andrews overnight underneath the sanctuary and what we call the undercroft. Now, as far as hygiene and things like that goes, they're going to have to put in new sewer lines and electricity, and it's a very complicated project, but we're only helping homeless women at St. Andrews.
I wonder about that, how difficult that, and is that a project that has been tried somewhere else that you know of?
No, and
Okay, the reason I ask is, it is almost impossible to keep men and women separated forever. And I'm thinking if there are children involved and the husbands or fathers want to come and spend some time with the children, it seems you got a lot of different kind of complications that are gonna that could arrive.
Oh, I see your point, and I agree with you completely. I trust the powers that be that have been working with homeless women for a very long time to guide St. Andrews into a position where we can do this in a safe and sanitary way. Sanitation is a huge issue, and these are temporary houses. There's a whole area of these houses already in Seattle. And what St. Andrews is doing is setting a precedent because this is a growing problem that women really want to, have their own area. And church parking lots, where all the cars used to be, as the light rail and RTD beefs up, church parking lots will be less necessary. So women can cluster on the parking lots of these churches. And I see it as being kind of like a, not a monastery or a convent, but kind of like a convent, because I see these women as being not necessarily holy rollers or that, kind of woman, but more like maybe a Roman Catholic nun. Mm-hmm. So I think they will have a strong belief in what we're doing inside the sanctuary.
Well, there are homes where women can come and spend the night, and I suspect knowledge of how that works would assist in this longer term project. And when you say housing for them, I suspect there are other aspects of it, like trying to find them jobs or something so that they
It is for yes, you're correct. Yes.
So that they can get out
right.
of that situation
right.
and into
real life,
traditional. As far as the value of the housing going down and the concern of the neighbors, I can understand that concern too, but I think that we have had segregated housing forever, and people think that way. There's no integrated housing. And I don't necessarily mean racial, but of course that's always been the forefront of everybody's mind. But economic differences, and so the realtors or the city or whoever the entity is that determines, because a certain group of people have moved into your neighborhood, therefore your property value will go down. It's a real concern, and I don't know how that will be resolved.
Well, at the meeting Sunday, I asked Mike, as he, yet again gave us the PowerPoint presentation of the future of the parking lots. I asked, when is this going to be in front of City Council? Will we be notified as church members when we can be at City Council to support this as, a bright and happy future for, I don't want to call it the neighborhood, but for our mission. St. Andrews is a sacred vision, sacred space. That was how they sold the last expansion. Since I joined St. Andrews in 1991, the church has expanded twice. Once, I have to admit, was because of a fire. And we had a major fire, and it was going to burn the place to the ground. But Marilyn, that owns a nearby Mercury Cafe, called the fire department, and they got it out before it burned to the ground. But we worshiped for a while by going to the Temple Event Center at 16th and Pearl. And then we came back, and then we have such great music. Tim Kruger directs the choir at St. Andrews. And it's just become a very popular spot for people to come on Sunday morning. Well, they want to people believe in what we're doing in the way of the Word of God and all that. And I think that they feel it's our mission. But Episcopalians are funny. I did not grow up Episcopalian. I grew up at University Park Methodist Church. And I only joined St. Andrews in 1991 because of a couple by the name of Betty and George Luce, who were going to build a dinner theater with Cliff Young at 12th and Lincoln. And they are no longer at St. Andrews. But when I was with a guy named Chuck Bates, I am gay and I had a relationship. They asked me to leave him at home and come to dinner at their home because they wanted me to meet Dana Crawford, because they were pitching me as the marketing director of the St. Mark's Playhouse because of my history at a theater at the Denver Performing Arts Center called Stage West. And they invited me to St. Andrews, which was it's an old church. It's over 100 years old. And it used to be full of bohemian hippies and sort of like crazy lunatics that thought they were like monks and nuns or whatever. And it was a crash pad for a lot of people that call themselves a holy family. And it's always been a very avant-garde church until rather recently. And there was this guy named Walter McCoy that moved here from Louisiana to start a school called St. Elizabeth's School. And he's retiring from that. But his daughter runs the Dolores Project. And she gave us our first presentation with the neighbors. And this is sort of old-time religion is the way that I look at it. And I only go to St. Andrews.
Old time, when you say old time religion.
I'm talking about myself.
Oh, for you.
Pentecostal, Mennonite, I really believe in Jesus. In fact, I'm going to Boulder tonight to study the Urantia book at the home of Mo Siegel. I started doing that in 1991 too, and that's a revelation. It's another take on the gospel. We're coming into Christmas season, and I really believe Jesus is the only Son of God, the sovereign Son of God. And God, it's Jesus' story, not mine, but I love the Christmas story. And I like to go to St. Andrews only on Sunday mornings, and if I drive, I park on the street. I frequently ride my bike to St. Andrews, so I don't have any relationship with a parking lot that I feel like I'm not going to have a place to park. But people that come to St. Andrews now have the nicest cars you can imagine. I mean, it's so upscale, it's off the charts. And this tiny house project may not fly. It may never be in front of city council, but it's what's happening right now at St. Andrews.
Yeah. Well, Randy, this has been most enlightening for me. I had never heard of this project for women, and I suspect there's something similar is going on for the men, at least in Fort Lyons is where I heard some work is being done. So maybe we will see some kind of solution, at least partial solution, to the problems of homeless, and especially as long as we have people like you who are interested enough to do something about it. I want to thank you for sharing all of this information, and hopefully there will be those of you who will support any effort to provide housing for all Americans.